that you may or may not have been taught, okay, and going to some of the theories that we have, okay. Now, before we jump into that though, okay, I always like to share just a couple of things because students will often ask, okay. In some of your older textbooks, okay, the various dates in history are given with either BC or AD. And just, no right or, well, there is a right or wrong answer. But does anyone know what BC stands for? Yeah. Before Christ. Okay? Before Christ. So it happened before the life, before the birth, life, whatever, of the person that we know as Jesus. This is the fun one, though. AD. Oh, sorry, Zan back there beat you.
Maybe something along the lines of Anno Domini and it being like
Very good, yes. Okay, someone took Latin. All right. Now, sometimes people are like after death, which it kind of makes sense, but it's not. It's Anno Domini, okay, which is Latin for the year of our Lord, referring once again to Jesus. Okay, now, in your textbooks, those of you that have started reading, maybe you notice that they are not using that notation because it is very Christian-centered, all right? And surprise, surprise, most of the world is not Christian, okay? I know. All right, I'm going to piss off some Republicans, but it's not, all right? And so what a lot of history textbooks are now doing, including yours, is using the notation BCE and CE. BCE just stands for before the Common Era, and CE is the Common Era, okay? It's a small thing. It's more like wordplay because guess what the dividing line is? It's the same thing, the life, birth, death of this person called Jesus, okay? So, yeah, all right, we changed the words, but it's basically the same thing. All right, so just so you're aware, if it says BCE, they mean BC. If it says CE, it's the old AD, okay? Number one. Number two, for whatever reason, history likes to make it just a little difficult. And every now and then, they will refer to something as the 17th century, okay, or the 15th century, okay? And then sometimes we'll just, flat out give years, okay? If this confuses you, all you have to do is subtract by 100. So the 17th century is the 1600s, and the 15th century is the 1400s, okay? So, for example, right now, we are in the 21st century, okay? What year is it? 2026, thank you, okay? So we are in the, in the 20s, in the 2000s, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's 2026, not 2126. Okay, type of thing. All right, so you will also see that in your textbook where they'll say, oh, in the 15th century. You see that, just subtract 100. Oh, the 1400s. Okay, so now that you're all ready as amateur historians with this, okay? One more term. Every now and then, and I believe your textbook uses this one as well, you will see the word prehistoric, okay? Santos, how does something happen before history? Well, it really doesn't. All this means is that it happened before writing was invented. Okay? I guess, we tend to consider that once it was written down, it's a much more accurate record than,
when people just shared things verbally, all right? And you had a designated rememberer, okay? And they were the ones that passed on those traditions. And so when it comes to something like this, okay, once again, it is a theory, okay, taken from prehistoric stories, and then at some point when writing's invented, somebody writes down all of these stories that have been passed down, and then of course physical evidence, archaeological evidence, remains and bones and sites and all of this other stuff. And so when it comes to hominids, okay, and you are going to need to know a lot of H words for this chapter, hominids includes the group of, and I'm just going to use the word creatures. Number one, gorillas, okay. Number two, I can't spell chimpanzee, so I just put chimps, but chimpanzees, okay. And number three, you and me, humans, okay. Now, the archaeological, the paleontological term for humans is hominins, okay, because we're not the only human species to have existed, okay? There are others, all right? I'll get to that in a second, okay? And so, when it comes to hominids, okay, we see the first evidence of hominid life about 23 million years ago somewhere in Africa, okay? So once again, take that in comparison with the creation stories, okay? Boom, all right? No matter which creation story you follow, 2 arms, 2 legs, head, body, okay? And in this case, no. We do, in fact, have various creatures, okay, under this classification of hominid, all right? In fact, us as humans, as hominins, okay, we do share, about 97-98% of our DNA with chimpanzees, okay? Now, what makes hominins different from gorillas and chimps, okay? Well, number one, bipedal locomotion, we walk on 2 legs. Okay, now, some of you are like, oh, I've seen chimps and gorillas. Okay, they can do it for short periods of times, but eventually then they go back to their knuckles as well, okay? Whereas us, we stay, boom, okay? Number 2, at some point, humanity figures out the miracle of fire, okay? What's fire good for? Okay, someone said cooking. Yes, probably the most important one. Warmth. All right. Now, originally, I'm imagining that lightning struck dead wood and boom, bursts into flames, and people are like, ooh, cold, hot. Let's stay here. Okay. And yes, this meat tastes a heck of a lot better after it's been passed over the flame a few times as opposed to just raw. Okay. And of course, this isn't overnight, but over the thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, eventually humans learn not only how to preserve it, but also then how to create it themselves, okay? Tools, when we talk about tools, please don't think of Home Depot and, whatever. Some of the earliest tools were literally just 2 rocks that humans would use to bang against things, okay? And then from there, we get more complicated stuff, okay? And then, of course, probably the one thing that sets us apart, not only from other hominids, like gorillas and chimps, but from other hominins, we'll talk about some of the other groups, is our various skills and our language ability, okay? Oh, but Mr. Santos, there's that gorilla that they taught in sign language. Okay, yes, all right, they are able to communicate to a certain degree, all right, but nothing like what we do, all right? So, yes, it worked. No, it didn't. It went backwards, okay? And so, how do we get from this, okay, to what we see today. All right, another important vocabulary word, evolution. Okay, now, evolution does not mean that one day, okay, please remind me of your name. Melody went to sleep a chimpanzee and then woke up this morning like this, a human. Okay? No, that is not evolution. Okay? Evolution is this change over hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years, okay, from one type of organism into something, more complex. Okay, the process is known as natural selection, or in common terms, survival of the fittest. Okay, you basically adapt to any change in the environment. Okay, and that adaptation is then passed on to your descendants. Okay, so something happens in the environment. All right, the other creatures similar to yourself die off, but one group is able to survive it because either their DNA or, through their skills, they're able to adapt. Okay, it is not, going to sleep a chimp, waking up a human. All right, which I've actually heard, there's one senator who, when questioning evolution, was like, well, if evolution's real, why are there still monkeys out there? Because that's not how it works. Like, the monkeys didn't go to sleep and suddenly woke up in my history class. Okay, you didn't just change overnight. Okay, type of thing. So in this case, you're able to adapt. You survive whatever change in nature happens, and so that DNA gets passed on to the next generations. And then those next generations, when another environmental change happens, some of them will die off, and then others will adapt, and so that DNA gets passed on. Okay, and then eventually you get this. Thank you. All right, we end up like this. Okay, so now this is not just for humans. Okay, this is for all plants and animals. Okay, I know we typically look at humans because that's who we are. All right, but you can see it over time in other plants. In other animals, and of course plants. Plants have also changed over the hundreds of thousands of millions of years. Okay, and so compared to creation stories, just to finish this part off, okay, God said plants, fishes, horses, whatever. No, all of that evolved over time. Okay, now, I promised you other hominins, okay, other human-like creatures, because we are not the only ones that have existed. We're the only ones that exist now, okay, but unfortunately, this is not a paleontology class, so I can't get into every single hominin. You want to learn about Australopithecine or Java Man or, all of this other stuff, you'll have to wait till you're 4 years old and take a specialized class. But for now, there are 3 hominins that you need to remember, okay? Number 1, Homo habilis, okay? What's important about Homo habilis, or what do I want you to know about Homo habilis? Homo habilis is the first hominin to use tools, okay? Now, once again, no, he didn't go down to Home Depot and buy a power saw, okay? Homo habilis realized that by using a rock, all right, it was a lot easier to break things down than by pounding it with your fist, okay? Or if you use a rock and it has a sharp edge, it is easier to cut open whatever animal you are about to eat than to try to rip it apart with your fingernails and your teeth, okay? And then from there, okay, we see the complexity of the tools improve Once again, we're still not at, Home Depot stage. But then eventually, hey, if we take these rocks and kind of like bang them and sharpen them and, give it an edge, okay, it can become, a little bit more useful. And oh, by the way, if we give it a really nice tip and then we tie it to a stick, all right, we can start using it as a weapon, and we don't have to get right up to the lion before we stab it. All right, we can stab it from 10 feet away, okay, type of thing. All right, the next hominin I want you to remember is Homo erectus. Okay, now, important thing about Homo erectus, as their name states, they are the first hominin to walk completely erect, to walk completely upright. Okay, Homo habilis still did this. Didn't quite drag their knuckles like a gorilla or a chimp, all right, but they were still kind of slouched over. Okay, Homo erectus, I know, I slouch still, maybe I'm part Homo habilis. All right, but fully erect, okay, upright, okay. They are also the first to recognize the concept of family, okay, meaning that we came from the similar group, and there's something between our little group here that makes us different from those, okay, that are in another group. And the example I have a friend who works at a veterinary clinic, okay, and one day she kind of comes in like, oh, my cat, she's not well, she's getting fat, she's doing this, Turns out the cat's pregnant, okay? You're going to get kittens. And the woman was like, that's impossible, right? There's no possible way. She's not exposed to any other male cat. So we're thinking here, oh my God, the Jesus cat, all right, cat Jesus or something. And it's like, no, okay? And so, the tech is asking questions and, are there any other cats in the house? And she's like, well, yeah, her litter mates, her brothers and sisters are there. And so my friend is like, well, that's how she got pregnant. There's boy cats, are they fixed? No. And she's like, oh, that's disgusting. Those are her brothers. What do you mean? You're saying that one of her brothers got her pregnant? Okay, I'm a cat person, dog person, whatever, but they don't have that concept of, okay? And before Homo erectus, neither did other hominids, okay? They are the first to understand, wait a second, we're part of the same grouping, and that group is different somehow, okay? They are the first to understand that concept, okay? They're the first also to discover fire, okay? So poor Homo habilis had to live in the cold and eat raw meat and all of that stuff. Homo erectus is the first, once again, to understand its uses and its importances. And then, of course, over time, a very long period of time, they're the ones, and eventually other hominins are the ones to, figure out how to harness it, how to create it, how to do all of that. Finally, travel, and I don't mean they packed up the family and went to Disney World, but in this case, they're the first to start migrating, to start moving from where they were in search of food and animals to hunt and in search of water. Okay, whereas other hominins basically just stayed in the same place, and once the food ran out, so did they. Okay, type of thing. All right, now we get to basically us, and this is the third hominin I want you to remember. And so, yes, I know, once again, there's no Australopithecine, there's no Cro-Magnon, there's no Neanderthal, because this isn't paleontology, but Homo sapien. Okay, the first Homo sapien appears about 300,000 years ago. Okay, now Homo sapien is basically us. Okay, that is the hominins. All right, that we are. Okay, over the hundreds of thousands of years,
Homo sapien develops, Homo sapien, evolves, so that around 100,000 years ago, we begin to see that they start to migrate out of Africa. Okay, why? All right, well, most Homo sapien, well, pretty much every Homo sapien society were hunter-gatherers. Okay, that was their lifestyle. And of course, we're not that creative with our names. How did they live? How did they obtain their sustenance? Yes. Yes, they hunted and they gathered. Okay, they hunted animals, ate the meat, and used the fur and used the skins. Okay, and of course, they found apples on the ground and they ate them. Then they found, I don't know, grasses and weeds and herbs, and they dug them up and ate those. Okay, and so boom. Okay, now we're not at farming, so once they ate all of, and I'm just going to go with berries because for some reason I'm craving blueberries. Once they ate all the blueberries that were here in this area, okay, then they moved to this area and ate all the blueberries here. And then they continued to another area, okay? And so that's how we get, all right, this whole traveling, this whole migration, so that, okay, and yes, I know I'm skipping hundreds of thousands of years, but honestly, I erased it, remember, prehistoric, nobody wrote this down, today we crossed the river out of Africa, because our leader, Santos, kept wanting blueberries, and kept going where the blueberries were. No, all right, so fast forward to about 16,000 years ago, and you'll see some books say 15, other books say 13, okay, yours says 16, okay, because once again, nobody left a road sign that said Broad was here, crossing into Alaska, type of thing. But during the last ice age, the water levels dipped so that there was a land/ice connection between Siberia and Alaska, and so we see then Homo sapien migrating into what eventually becomes the Americas. Okay, now, one of the things that allows Homo sapien to survive, and we will talk about this in a minute, is Homo sapien is the first hominin, okay, to develop the use of a language, okay? Before this time, okay, other hominins were basically communicated with grunts and chatters and motions, and were more instinctual, okay, type of thing. They did, yeah, I'm hungry, I get food. Oh, this is my part of my clan, my group. They're hungry too, so I bring them food, type of thing. But with Homo sapiens now, we begin to see the formation of everything up here now comes out right here. Okay, so they're the first. Right now, why are Homo sapien the only hominin left? Why are they the only one? Although technically, all right, this is just me going on a tangent. They did DNA studies, and it's mostly amongst Europeans, so my Euro-American friends. Okay, anywhere from like 2 to 3% maternal Neanderthal DNA is somewhere in your system. Okay, so it kind of shows that at some point Homo sapien did mate with Neanderthal, and some of you might still have some of that latent Neanderthal DNA. But for the most part, most of us are strictly Homo sapien. Okay, and yes, Neanderthal has died off, except for those of you who may still have, a little bit of that trace DNA. Okay. I always like to say, yeah, I've met people with like, I don't know, really big foreheads. Yeah, I think those are the Neanderthal DNA, like sticking, I don't know, maybe. All right. But in this case, we see then, because, all right, Homo sapien does have FYI, and once again, we can't get too much into this. Homo sapien does have a bigger brain capacity, okay, which equals a greater intellectual capacity. So they're able to recognize patterns. They're able to recognize, traits. They're able to, remember, they're able to develop language, okay, so that now that we have fire, let's say, and Homo sapien realizes that, how to create it, getting those sparks going onto dry grass, okay, because I've developed language, I can now pass it on to my offspring and show and say, hey, Liv, you rub rocks, okay, little flame, grass, boom. And so now the knowledge of fire is passed on after I die. It is Liv, right? Okay, and then when Liv has her own children, she teaches them, and they preserve the fire. And suddenly her son goes, Mom, we can do it with a couple other things as well, and it would still be, the flame and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so yes, all right, Homo sapien is able to adapt. Homo sapien is able to use things to its advantage, okay? And I put this up here because, yes, we do see that adjustment to the surroundings, but then we also begin to see then, customs and habits and other cultural things, okay? Meanwhile, we have Oliver learns how to prepare animal skins into warm clothing. So now it doesn't matter if we have an ice age, it doesn't matter if we move into cold climates, all right? We have our fur maker, thanks Oliver. And of course, because of the language skills, Oliver is able to pass that on to the offspring, and now they know how to make, coverings and furs. And so Homo sapiens are able to survive cold environments, whereas other hominins would just freeze. Okay? So, one of the things you're going to discover, if you haven't already, from the homework assignment I gave you, I've got this weird fascination with maps. I'm obsessed with them. Okay? And so, my slides, my presentations will have lots of maps. And yes, most of your homework assignments will be looking at maps and interpreting the data. If you don't like maps, too bad. All right, there's plenty of other history teachers. Okay, and so this is one map that kind of shows. And once again, this is our best guess. All right, this is all prehistoric. Okay, as to how Homo sapien migrated across the planet. Okay. First evidence, and I know the map says 150 to 200,000 years ago. Once again, we don't have an exact date. Nobody said, I'm the first, okay, and left a marker, okay? But we know it happened in Africa, and then from there, okay, humanity starts spreading out into different parts of the planet. Trust me, I'll have more, okay? And so, what makes Homo sapien unique? What are some of the things then that we see from Homo sapien? And I know I already said this, but probably the most important was language, okay? Because it is one thing to figure out that, yes, the lightning struck that tree and it's causing it to burn. If I'm able to take some of that fire, it can help me with staying warm and with cooking my food and providing light and all of that, okay? But then it dies out and you're like, well, shit, now we have to wait until the next lightning storm, all right, to get fire again. But, once Homo sapien is able to figure out how to recreate it, all right, as I mentioned, I pass that on to my descendants, and my descendants pass it on to their descendants, and they pass it on. And at some point, someone decides, it would be a lot easier if we used dry brush. You know what? I know we've just been using regular rocks, but what if, we found these special darker rocks that for some reason cause more sparks, And so little by little, all right, that knowledge, all right, is being passed on. Same thing, we have our original fur developer here that gives us warm clothes and blankets.
But along the way, the descendants realize that, you know what, if we mix it with these other things, if we cut it this way, if we prepare it, a different way, then it'll retain more heat, okay, type of thing. All right. Now, as I mentioned already, the primary way in which these societies lived was hunting and gathering. Okay. Now, this is actually kind of cool, at least for me as a history dork. About 3.5 years ago, well, let me back up. For the longest time, we truly believed, and because once again, there wasn't a lot of evidence to the contrary, so we basically had to take our best guess. We truly believed that it was the men that went out hunting, and it was the women that, gathered, food, all right? Because, men hunt, men manly, okay? And women, it's easy, they can walk around, there's the bush, gather apples, gather fruit, gather, vegetables, whatever. And as we have found more and more fossilized remains, and in some cases, early female Homo sapiens had like wounds in their fossilized bones consistent with, being stabbed or being bitten by an animal or, having died this type of death. And some of the males, had certain things, that were consistent with, these guys didn't run anywhere. These guys didn't exert themselves physically. And so it turns out, and so we've modified our view that it was both the women and the men that were out there hunting and gathering. Okay, and so this is one, and once again, I'm going to preach just a little bit. This is one of the dangers sometimes of looking at history, is that we take our own morals and our own values and our own ideas and try to impose it on the past. So yeah, men hunt, men are workers, women stay home. And so yeah, okay, it was the men that hunted and the women that gathered. Well, it turns out that no, there were also women hunters that went out there, and the men also gathered. Okay, it wasn't an exclusive division of manly jobs and girly jobs type of thing. Okay, and I'm not going to launch into oh yeah, the patriarchy sucks, bring it down. But we, at some point we do get those ideas. But now, while we're still hunting and gathering, obviously our tribes, our clans, our families are going to stay small. Okay, because there's only so many berries in these bushes. There's only so many apples in this tree. And while it may feed my family, okay, or, part of my, yeah, you can turn into it, all right, and the random, stranger that walks in, it's not going to feed everyone, okay? So we stay small and we stay mobile because we follow where the food, once we eat all of the berries and apples from here, we move on to a different area, okay? And every other group is doing the same, okay? Now, as all of this is happening, because, we are fed, we're not starving to death, and, we do have time to develop not just language, okay, but little by little, okay, we begin to see the development of other things, okay? It's not strictly survival any longer, okay? Trying to understand, okay, why we're here, trying to understand nature, okay? Remember, okay, why is religion started in the very, very beginning?
So people can understand
Understand what?
their environment.
Yes, okay, once again, tomorrow it is going to be cold because the ice god is going to visit us. No. Okay? It's because there's some kind of low pressure system that's going to suck air from the Arctic and it's going to swing down. And then Sunday, all right, there's an offshore system that's going to, kick moisture and that when it hits that Arctic air, we're supposed to get quite a bit of snow. Okay? But of course, 10,000 years ago, I might have just said, Neptune pissed off, all right, Thor will come in and, dump a bunch of snow on us.
What were the first years that we believed in a religion or started?
We get into like 7,000 BCE or so, once you get some of the first like actual organized societies, where people are no longer strictly using it to explain nature, all right, but they're using it now for other things, okay? But in the beginning, okay, that's how we understood nature, okay? And so little by little, we begin to get, stories and myths and mythologies when it comes to this, okay? Because it does evolve and it does develop over time, okay? One of the ones that I like to share, when I do this lesson, and one of my favorites, okay? Once upon a time, right, there was Mother Earth, okay? And Mother Earth was happy. And there were humans, and she provided us with food and drink and a beautiful environment and whatnot. And sorry, this is a Greek myth. I should explain that, because one day Hades, the god of the underworld, okay, saw Mother Nature's daughter, Persephone, and she was gorgeous, all right, and he fell in love with her. And so what he does is he kidnaps her and he drags her to the underworld to be with him, okay? Well, Mother Earth was very, very sad, okay, very depressed. And little by little, the trees started to die, the plants started to wither away, the water started to freeze, the world became colder. And so humans, all right, were obviously starting to die off. And they pled to Zeus, like, Zeus, you gotta do something here, all right, because we're dying, And so Zeus goes to Hades, who is his brother, somehow, and says, dude, all right, the earth is dying. And it's all because you kidnapped Persephone and her mom is depressed. All right, so you gotta give her back. Okay, and he's like, no, I love her. She's like gorgeous. I mean, she's my kidnap victim. All right, and now we're married, and the whole thing. Yes. Okay. So, Zeus, his fly was down basically. He made it with everyone. All right, but we'll get into that. And so they come to this agreement where Persephone will live 6 months with mom and 6 months with her husband/kidnapper, okay, in the underworld. All right. And so when Persephone returns to her mother, okay, the earth is bright and sunny, and the flowers grow, and the crops develop, and all of that happens. And then once she goes back to her husband, to the underworld, things start to die, and it gets darker, and it gets colder, and it gets, more depressing. And then, it happens all again in reverse. What were the Greeks trying to explain? Summer and winter, what are those called?
The seasons.
The seasons, yeah. Why is it bright and sunny and warm right now, and then suddenly it gets cooler and the leaves start dying and it gets darker and darker and darker, and then it looks like this, and then it's going to get super cold. I'm actually surprised it's sunny today. I wish it was cloudy. It would have made today's lesson much more, and then suddenly, things start to slowly bloom again, and the flowers and the plants and the rain, and then we get back. Yes, okay, they didn't understand that the earth rotates around, the sun, but it's not a perfect thing. It's at an angle, so when it's over here, more light hits there. When it's over here, it hits in the other continent. They didn't know all that, okay? We know that's why we have seasons, okay? The Greeks were like, Earth's sad. Persephone must be in the underworld. Okay, ooh, Earth happy. Persephone must be chilling with her mom right now. Okay, type of thing. And so yes, okay, we get those stories. We get those myths. We get those, types of things. All right? Now, of course, with early Homo sapien, we're not quite there yet. Okay? We do see a lot of cave paintings. Okay? This is one of the most famous ones. It's in a cave in a place called Altamira, which is in Spain. Okay? This has been there for tens of thousands of years. What does it kind of sort of look like?
A bull.
A bull. Yeah. Okay. And if I were to show you the whole thing, it's like a herd. All right. They're like wandering around and stuff like that.
But yeah, they begin to draw the things that are important to them, and pretty soon, Spain develops a culture around bulls, and there's like a bull god, and then, we get the Minotaur, and, like all of these other things. And even to this day, love it or hate it, there's bullfighting, and there's a reason behind it. There's the running of the bulls, and like all of this other stuff. And it all stems from this ancient tradition that we developed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Okay? I'm going to stop right there because I want to talk about agriculture in a separate thing. Okay? Because we literally have just covered like millions of years of history. So I think we did good for one day. All right? So I'm going to stop right here.